Hey, deserving listeners, I thought I would watch some TikToks related to gaslighting. I would just type in the word gaslighting into the search bar and see what comes up. And then I'm going to react to these videos. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. I've become somewhat of a specialist in gaslighting, not only because I've treated convicted perpetrators over the years, but also I get a lot of emails about the concept. So I have had to refine my understanding of it so that I can teach it and talk about it. Let's watch.
Here are 3 examples of what gaslighting looks like. So gaslighting is a psychological manipulation where one person is trying to sow seeds of doubt into their partner, and they're trying to make them question their own memory, their perception, or their sanity.
All right, so doing great so far. She's getting at 3 examples, but the definition thus far is good. Sounds like she's reading it to some extent from the internet, but that's the definition. But the problem is that just reading a definition of a psychological concept is not an indication that someone understands the concept. Like I can read the definition of a cancer cell, for example, but I'm not a biologist, I'm not a physician, so I don't know how to diagnose cancer just from reading the definition. But let's watch.
Oftentimes this is seen in narcissistic relationships or with narcissists because this is how they gain control in the relationship.
So the obsession the internet has with narcissism, it's really strange to me. As a clinician for almost 30 years and someone who specializes in personality disorders, particularly borderline narcissism, histrionic, this sort of thing, I can tell you that the recent, maybe within the last 5 years, and it just seems to be getting worse, the obsession that people have, even other clinicians, honestly, it's really upsetting. But, all right, so what do I say briefly? This would be like if you were explaining to an alien what a car was, what an automobile was, and you said, so a car is defined as a vehicle with 4 wheels that has some sort of engine that gets you from point A to point B. It can transport 1 or more people, something like that. All right, so you're doing pretty well thus far. Then you add to the definition by saying, and in particular, it involves a red car that's painted red, and it's made by Chevrolet, and it was manufactured between the years 2015 and 2016. That's what this is like. Gaslighting can exist in a variety of different personality types, a variety of different sorts of people, including people who suffer from narcissistic personality disorder. But not everyone with narcissistic personality disorder is going to engage in gaslighting or even with abuse. The thing that has to be established is that gaslighting is within an abusive relationship. When you think gaslighting, think abusive relationship. It's just one of the tactics that abusive perpetrators will use to control the victims. It's not something that you can just do. You can't meet someone and gaslight them in terms of the clinical definition. But I understand that language changes and people start using words to mean other sorts of things. But I find that there are other words that we have for those situations, like lying to someone or motivated reasoning or, just trying to manipulate. Just say manipulate or lying. Anyway, but let's watch.
So the first one is denying something that definitely happened. So an example of this could be like you and your partner had a huge argument and maybe they called you names or said something. And then the next day when you try to confront them, they completely deny that ever happened.
This is perhaps an example. It's just hard to know. But on one hand, yes, if you have a partner that is calling you names and being verbally abusive, and then the next day they say you were crazy and they claim they don't remember calling you those names, might that be gaslighting? Yeah, that could be. On the other hand, it's universal that when you are in a fight with your partner, let's say 2 people have a fight one night and there's no abuse happening. It's just regular conflict. Maybe it's high conflict. Universally, when those 2 people come into my office for couple therapy and I ask them how their week was and they say, oh, we had this fight last night. And then I say, oh, why don't you tell me about it? And each of them will have a completely different story and will be upset at the other person for making stuff up or not remembering things. That's not gaslighting. That's just typical selective memory that we all engage in. It's not a great thing. It really can be highly destructive. I'm not saying it's good, but that's not gaslighting.
To say that you were crazy, you heard wrong, that's not what happened, I never said that. And then what that causes you to do is go, oh my God, did I make this up? Is there something wrong with me? You start to discredit your own fucking reality. Generally speaking,
that's a good it's a good example. But if I were a little asterisk on her shoulder, if you will, I would say that it's within an abusive relationship. There would be a lot of other behaviors and experience that typified that an abusive relationship was happening. But, maybe for a lot of victims, they don't identify that way yet. That's often true. And a video like this might help them to see, well, hey, that does happen to me. Maybe I am being gaslit. But I think the problem is that often the way this is talked about without understanding the broader topic of what an abusive relationship would look like and how it would feel like as a victim, that if you had a fight with your partner last night and it's not abusive, it's not gaslighting, and you both remember different things, very quickly I will see people say, you're gaslighting me, when it's now, I don't know. Is it a harm that people misuse the terms in terms of what I think is the definition? There's probably not a ton of harm, but I think that, one, it's important not to minimize the experience of actual victims of gaslighting by just claiming everything is gaslighting. Also, I'm very much a fan of precision in language, because then we not only have to refine our concepts as we speak and communicate, but it also helps other people to understand what we're saying. And if we just dilute the term of gaslighting to mean anything, then it ruins our opportunity of not only understanding what we are trying to say, but also communicating it.
And then you don't hold boundaries, because now that person has just made you feel like you're the crazy one. 2, trivializing your feelings or emotions. An example of that could be that your partner says something to you that hurts you, and you express yourself saying, hey, that really hurt my feelings. And instead of them acknowledging and saying, hey, so sorry, didn't mean to hurt your feelings, didn't mean to say it that way, they start to say, you're too sensitive, you're overreacting, you're making a big...
Okay, this one's even worse. It could be gaslighting, absolutely. If I were, and I have, treated an abusive perpetrator, the perpetrator of intimate partner violence and control, this is something that often will happen. The abusive individual will harm the victim. The victim will express their feelings, and the abusive person will say, you're overreacting. It's almost universal that abusive people will do that. But this also happens outside of abusive relationships. You will find that almost everybody, and I'm telling you, as a specialist in couple therapy, almost everyone, even the most healthiest of couples, when they hurt their spouse's feelings, which is just going to happen over time, and the spouse, the partner says, hey, you hurt my feelings, almost all the time. It's really aggravating, not only just to me personally, but also just as a clinician. It's so hard to get across to people that if someone expresses to you that you've hurt their feelings, even if you think that they're overly sensitive, you just don't want to start there. You maybe get there later, maybe, but up front, you just want to say, oh my God, what happened? I'm sorry, or ask questions, or just stay within a more questioning stance or gathering information stance. At best, you can say, I'm so sorry that I hurt your feelings. I didn't mean to, but I take your word for it because I love you and I want you to be happy. So, and I also know that I'm not a perfect observer of reality. I have biases, we all do. So although I can't figure out why your feelings are hurt, I just have to figure I have a blind spot, or I'm not you. I don't see things the way you do, which is fine. Everyone's different. Almost never do people react like that. So if this is if this is a good example of gaslighting, that really anytime this happens, gaslighting is happening, is what is being said, then literally every human on the planet is gaslighting. So there's that. Now, again, in an abusive relationship, does it happen? Yes, almost universally. But it also happens in every relationship. So.
Deal out of nothing. They might say things like, you're super dramatic, can't you take a joke? And again, it avoids taking accountability because God forbid somebody say, hey, you're right, I did hurt you, didn't mean to. And 3, shifting blame and undermining your thoughts. A great example of this is you think and you suspect that your partner is cheating on you. And when you try to talk to them and say something, instead of understanding your concerns and maybe having a conversation about it, they accuse you of being paranoid, untrusting. They say that you're insecure.
All right. Again, not a great example. Could it be gaslighting? Absolutely. If you have an abusive partner who is cheating, which can happen for sure, and the victim of the abuse finds out or suspects and questions the abusive partner about infidelity and says, hey, so-and-so said that they saw you with this other person. And then the abusive cheater, it says, oh my God, you're paranoid, you're insecure. Could that be a part of a larger campaign of gaslighting that the abusive person is engaging in? Absolutely. But it could also be that the person literally is paranoid. That happens. In fact, and this happens a lot too, where accusations of gaslighting will happen from the abusive person. So let's consider this exact example, but in a different relationship where you have the abusive person is accusing the victim of cheating, which happens. And the victim is not cheating. And the victim is like, what are you talking about? I'm not cheating. If anyone, you're cheating, but I'm not cheating. You're paranoid. And this person, I know you're cheating because I saw you texting someone the other day. And you're thinking, maybe I was texting my mom. I think you're paranoid, okay? And then this person's like, you're gaslighting me. No, they're not. This person is the abusive person. So that's why in the example that I gave earlier about you can read the definition of some biological, or I can, as a non-biologist, I can read a definition of some biological process and still not be able to diagnose it. And this is an example of that. You need to study this. You need to look at the research. You need a lot of clinical experience and people that supervise you to manage how you manage your own countertransference, your own judgment, your own assessments. But of the gaslighting TikToks that I've seen, I'll tell you, this one is a lot better than the other ones. I'm guessing that this TikTok video does a lot of good, honestly. I live in a world of academia and clinicians and research and the clinical literature, and looking at TikToks, it's just a sharp contrast to that. So I want to pause here and say that the rest of this video will just be for members of the YouTube channel. I'm going to start the next bit by providing the definition, just a quick definition to establish what the clinical definition is. And I've also thought about it and expanded on it a little bit, given my own take on the matter, but that'll be that. So if you want to watch this, become a member by clicking the join button or the link in the description. And otherwise, take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.